Good evening. Shabbat Shalom. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here this evening to celebrate with Kol Hadash. I have to move the mic up a little bit. It's a pleasure to see you in person. It's a pleasure to see those people joining us online as well. Our topic of discussion tonight is something that's been in the headlines. Recent events in Israel and Gaza may portend hope or more of the same. We'll have a chance to explore a little bit later. As a theme for the service tonight, though, I've chosen the theme of peace, which is the aspirational side of current events. So hopefully these readings, these songs, these moments of reflection will create at least peace in our hearts, which may or may not have an impact on the world beyond. So we'll start with a nigun, a melody, where the singing together is more important than the content of the words, because the words actually, most of them don't mean anything. Bim bam doesn't mean anything in any Jewish language that I know of, but it means that we're singing together. And then the second half, Shabbat Shalom, is wishing each other, of course, a peaceful time to be together and to pause and reflect. So as you feel comfortable, please join me. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam, bim bam, bim 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 bam. Bim, 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 bam. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Bim, bam, bim, 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 bam, bim, 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 bam. Just hum. Why do we wish each other peace on Shabbat? Shabbat is a time of stopping. Perhaps we desire peace and quiet. Shabbat is a time to avoid ordinary work. Perhaps we seek peace and stillness. The Babylonian Shabbatum, from which our Shabbat evolved, was a time of danger and fear. Through centuries of Jewish suffering, the promise of peace, even if only for one day, meant much. Early rabbis envisioned Shabbat as a hint of the Garden of Eden and of the world to come. A cosmic peace. And for us, Shabbat is what we make of it. If peace is what we need, Shabbat Shalom it shall be. To light our Shabbat candles this evening, I'd like to invite our owning host, Janet Sentry, to come forward as we sing Baruch HaOr, Let Us Light These Lights. Why is the fruit of the vine a symbol of peace? It takes time, it takes stability, it takes calm for a vine to grow and set down roots, for the fruit to develop, for the grape to be harvested and pressed, and for that juice to sit and sit and sit, to become something different, to transform into the wine that we enjoy even more than the juice. It only happens if life is peaceful. And so the vine has been a symbol of peace in Jewish life for many centuries because of that reflection of what it takes to make wine. It takes peace. This evening I'll sing our Kiddush in Hebrew. Those who know the words or melody are welcome to join me, and then we can say the English all together. Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Borei pri hagafen. In English, blessed is the light of the world, blessed is the light of humanity that brings forth the fruit of the vine. L'chaim, to life.
Shalom Aleichem, Boechem LaShalom, Ohavi HaShalom, Teichem LaShalom, Miyom Ze LaYamim Habayim, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Ohavei HaShalom, Shomarei Shalom. Shalom Aleichem, Ro'etfei Shalom, Shalom Aleichem.
Pursuing peace. Happy is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gets understanding. Length of days is in its right hand, in its left hand are riches and honor. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, all its paths are peace. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who lay hold of it. Happy is everyone who retains it. Be like the students of Aaron, loving peace and pursuing peace. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn war anymore, but every person will sit under their vine and their fig tree. No one will make them afraid. Who is the person who desires life, who loves years of seeing good? Guard your lips from evil and your tongue from speaking deceit. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it.
Al shalosh ha'devarim, al shalosh ha'devarim, al shalosh ha'devarim, olam omed. Al shalosh ha'devarim, al shalosh ha'devarim, al shalosh ha'devarim, olam omed. Ahadin ve'ahemet ve'ahashalom shalom. Ahadin ve'ahemet ve'ahashalom shalom. Al shalosh ha'devarim, al shalosh ha'devarim. Al shalosha shalosha devarim halom halom amed.
Wild peace. Not the peace of a ceasefire, not even the vision of the wolf and the lamb, but rather, as in the heart when the excitement is over and you can talk only about a great weariness. I know that I know how to kill, that makes me an adult. And my son plays with a toy gun that knows how to open and close its eyes and say, Mama. A peace without the big noise of beating swords into plowshares, without words, without the thud of the heavy rubber stamp. Let it be light, floating, like a lazy white foam, a little rest for the wounds. Who speaks of healing? And the howl of the orphans is passed from one generation to the next, as in a relay race, the baton never fails. Let it come like wildflowers, suddenly, because the field must have it. Wild peace. In a humanistic Jewish congregation, we are not obligated to focus on the Torah portion for the week, but sometimes it works out very well. This week, the traditional Torah portion is the first one in the Torah, called Bereshit, in the beginning. It covers the first 5 chapters of Genesis, and it's being read because this week we observe the holiday of Simchat Torah, which is the recycling of the Torah cycle, where you unroll it all the way and re-roll it up, and you have the beginning of the beginning. Now, in chapter 4 of Genesis, we have firsts. Of course, all of the beginning of Genesis is firsts. The first transgression, the first forbidden fruit, the first failure, the first sin. But chapter 4 brings in new firsts. First, we have the first professions. Adam and his wife Eve have 2 sons. They have Cain and then Abel. Abel becomes a keeper of sheep, a shepherd, and Cain becomes a farmer, someone who tills the soil. If you remember the musical Oklahoma, you might know that the cowman and the farmer do not always get along. And so this is also the first rivalry. In this case, a sibling rivalry, but also professions rivalry, lifestyles rivalry, potential for conflict even. They do the first sacrifices. Cain brings an offering of fruit, and Abel brings the choice of the firstlings of the flock. Now, the Hebrew god Yahweh is a carnivore. He much prefers the meat to the vegetable sacrifice. And Cain is upset. The Hebrew god Yahweh says to Cain, "Why are you worried? Don't worry, you'll be fine." But it doesn't work. So in verse 8, we get another first. Cain spoke to his brother Abel, And when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. Yahweh said to Cain, "Where is your brother Abel?" And Cain said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" And then God said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's bloods cry out to me from the ground. Therefore you will be even more cursed than the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. If you till the soil, it will no longer yield its strength to you. You will become a ceaseless wanderer on earth." So the farmer who poured water in to cause growth has now added blood to the soil and brought death into the world. Remember, they were sentenced to death by eating from the tree and being expelled from the garden, but nothing had died yet. And there are rabbinic commentaries on this story that have Cain saying, "What are you doing, Abel? Why are you still there?" Because after all, the first murderer might not know what it takes to murder. Cain says to the God, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. Since you have banished me this day from the soil, and I must avoid your presence, I must become a restless wanderer on the earth. Anyone who meets me may kill me. Look what I've unleashed in the world, that violence may come back and hurt me." And so Yahweh said to him, "I promise, if anyone kills Cain, sevenfold vengeance shall be taken on him." And Yahweh put a mark on Cain, lest anyone who meet him should kill him. Cain left the presence of Yahweh and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Steinbeck title? Anybody? Now the next verse creates a whole other problem, because it says, Cain knew his wife, and she bore a child. Wife? Where did that come from? Maybe you could harmonize evolution and creationism by having Cain's wife evolve, and then Cain and Adam were created, and maybe you harmonize the two. But that's a different problem. What we find here, though, is this dilemma: what to do with the one who kills someone else. Later biblical legislation will create a city of refuge for the accidental manslaughter, where the blood desire to cause a retributive death would cause a cycle of vengeance that would never end. So maybe the accidental manslaughterer goes to a city of refuge and things calm down. But this was murder, this was jealousy, this was violence. The challenge with Genesis is that the end of the story has to be the reality of the world in which we live now. It's an origin story. We can't end the story with everyone immortal. That's not life today. People have to die, and we have to show that they can die, and so they do. People are violent today. We have to show how they became violent, and so they are. The challenge for us in reading and rereading and rereading these stories is, can we change the ending today? If this is how we were, and this is how part of us is innately, is that inevitably what we must turn out to be? And that's the difference between literature and life. Shalom. Shalom is Hebrew for peace. Shalom was a vision postponed until the end of days because many thought that shalom was shlemut, perfection. Hebrew prophets prayed for shalom, dreaming not of victory but of an end to violence. After so many centuries of terrible destruction, the world should begin to realize that there is no alternative to shalom. Yet an end to war is not shalom. Violence is not only in war. Hunger and poverty, oppression and abuse are all violence. We cannot wait to solve these problems. They are our problems, and their solution is in our hands. When we vow to create shalom, we take up a banner humanly sanctified by need and aspiration. We can have no higher obligation.
Na'aseh shalom ba'olam, na'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, ve'imru shalom, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, na'aseh shalom, na'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam.
Peacemakers, person wanted, wanted. A person who can be truthful among liars must be unwilling to sell their fellow human for any price, honor, or fame, and be unable to ignore injustice or brutality, even though it be to their advantage. The blood of the times must course through their words, and for their ideas be prepared to enter prison. They must take the part of the injured without seeking applause, be able to think intimately and speak from the heart. They must extend a brotherly hand and act better than they speak. They must not condemn another and remain blind to their own faults. They should be the artist of the deed, the greatest of the arts. They must raise the value of humanity, starting with themselves. Wages will be small, the work steady. Alehem HaShalom means may peace be upon them. When we remember loved ones and wish for them shalom, what do we mean? Do we hope that they are judged favorably for the life beyond? No. For life needs no final reward to have meaning. Living a generous and courageous life gives meaning. Our memories do not change them, but they must change us. When we remember those we loved and say, Alehem HaShalom, we really mean, may their memory bring us peace. If you're comfortable standing, could I ask you to stand for just a moment? In our community, once each month, we share the names of loved ones, the anniversary of whose death occurs in this time of the year. We remember them with great love, their touch, their name, their face, their voice, all the things that made them special to us. And we know that this tradition of memory will also someday come to us as others remember the positive impact we had on their lives. Tonight we remember with great love Norman Ackerman, Dolores Around, Albert Baer, Frederick Balin, Rose Bosis, Bernard Century, Marie DeMeo, Molly Doman, Anita Edwards, Robert Fleischer, Wendy Fretzen, Pearl Friedlander, Melvin Gerberding, Daniel Herring, Eileen Heron, Chris Jackson, George Jarris, Bernice Kersner, Alice Lakin, Frida Levitt, Leopold Lavoie, David Marcus, Charles Lee Marquis, Belle Matthews, Ben Matthews, Julius Novak, Mari Pashko, Morris Richter, Daniel Rothenberg, Nathan Rothenberg, Alvin Sampson, Bertie Saracen, Jacob Schechner, Gloria Scheinbein, Harry Shepard, James Citrick, Robert Slaw, Catherine Tankel-Lipkin, Sylvia Ruth Telzer, Margaret Whitlinger, and J.J. Ravani Waxler. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute to their memories and in memory of all of our loved ones. In Jewish life, we say, Zecher Tzadikim Livracha, the memory of good people is a blessing to us. Please be seated as we hear a song of love. To my right is our congregational menorah. Its 7 lights remind us of the 7 days of the week. It also reminds us of the menorah that stood at the ancient temple in Jerusalem, and the symbol of the modern state of Israel also is the 7-candled menorah. These are the many strands of our lives that come together as one community. Drawing from the Unitarian tradition of lighting candles of joys and concerns, we've started a tradition here at Kol Hadash of lighting candles of simcha and suris, uplifting moments and difficult moments that we face. This could be a chance to light a candle in celebration of something wonderful in your life or the life of someone you know. It could be a candle in memory of someone whose absence is felt in this season. Or it could be a candle of concern for someone whom you know is facing a difficult time in their life. And so with this, I stop talking And I turn it over to you or to those online as well to share a message. We've had some issues hearing the people online in person. Sometimes the sound is not so clear, so if you prefer online to type a message, I'm happy to share that through the chat and light a candle on your behalf as well. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to come forward and light a candle. David.
Thank you. These flame-proof candles just... No. Got it. Okay. Several weeks ago, actually right at the beginning of the high holidays, my daughter developed a very sudden and severe hearing problem. And actually, Susie Garfield reported it at the service because she had read about it on, my daughter was talking about it on Facebook. And what happened was she developed severe tinnitus and total loss of hearing in one ear. And something that apparently is not that uncommon, about 1 person in 1,000. And the ENTs say they have no clue what causes it, but they rushed her in immediately with cortisone shots in the ear, which couldn't have been pleasant. And oddly enough, several hours, several days a week in hyperbaric oxygen chamber. And she recovered. That's what I'm here to report. All of a sudden, not all of a sudden, after about a week, the hearing started coming back, and she still has slight buzzing from tinnitus, but she's hearing just fine. And the ENT, her ENT is coincidentally was a college roommate, so they have a very good line of communication between them. Told her last week that she didn't want to tell her at the time, but this was a miracle. She was betting against quietly ever seeing this recovery. So it's over and done with.
Tamar Schwartz shared a message online. She said her dear friend has put her house on the market. Money is tight, but she's nervous exploring real estate opportunities in Chicago because of current enforcement. She is a person of color and so feels more a target. And so Tamar is hoping that she'll be able to find a new home soon. Yes.
This is a combination of good, happy, sad and happy. My husband had an infection in his arm, and we tried antibiotics, oral antibiotics for 10 days, and it got severely worse. He was fighting me about going into the hospital, but on Saturday we insisted he had to go in the hospital and start IV antibiotics. He got out on Wednesday, and as of today, he's almost back to normal. He's dressing himself, he's using his head, he gets up in the middle of the night. So this is a happy one, and a happy one for that.
Another online comment first. Amy is lighting a candle for the No Kings Marchers Everywhere tomorrow. So we will light a candle for that, even though we do not endorse or oppose candidates for political office. As a congregation, you can do whatever you want. Please.
I can shrink down. So I just wanted to light a candle in praise of my sister, who has had cancer now for over 25 years of lymphoma, sorry. And she has gone through at least 6 or 8 types of therapy. She is still alive. She is a miracle in that she has survived every round of this with some horrible consequences during those times. She and her husband now are just bought a home in Florida, and they're going to be moving down there for 6 or 7 months out of the year, and it'll be a great place for her to be able to relax and not deal with the cold weather in Chicago. So, in her honor.
On a lighter note, tomorrow is the anniversary, the 2nd anniversary of my parents' move to Lake Forest Place, which has been a phenomenal, wonderful thing. So 2 years at Lake Forest Place and counting. Mazel tov.
I'll light this last candle in honor of those joys that were not shared and those concerns that are perhaps too deep to share.
Out of the ruins and rubble, out of the smoke, out of our night of struggle, can we see a ray of hope? One pale thin ray reaching for the day. We can build a beautiful city. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can build a beautiful city, not a city of angels, but we can build a city of man. We may not reach the ending, but we can start. Slowly but truly mending, brick by brick, heart by heart. Maybe now, we can start learning how we can build a beautiful city. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can build a beautiful city, not a city of angels, but we can build a city of man. When your trust is all but shattered, when your faith is all but killed, you can give up bitter and battered, or you can finally start to build a beautiful city. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. We can build a beautiful city, not a city of angels, but finally a city of man.
2 years ago, on Simchat Torah, we woke up in North America to a nightmare. Some hours before, around dawn in Israel, the violence had begun. An invasion from Gaza that killed hundreds, that raped, murdered, burned, destroyed, and kidnapped Israeli citizens and soldiers. It did not spare the youngest or the oldest, and it was the beginning of this new stage in a conflict between Gaza and Israel. Now we are on the other side, almost exactly 2 years later. A ceasefire has been signed, 20 points have been made, everyone agrees, kumbaya, or maybe not. I want to share with you some headlines, some top-line optimism, and then maybe some realism behind it. The guns have fallen silent, say the headlines, and it is a good thing that the rockets, the bombs, the artillery, they have fallen silent. The death toll is way down, day by day, hour by hour. But the guns have all fallen silent? Not so fast, say the Hamas gunmen settling scores on Gaza streets with other clans and rivals. Not so fast, said the IDF to Palestinians approaching what they now call the yellow line, the barrier of the parts of Gaza where Israeli troops still remain. Just over 50% of the Gaza Strip is still under the control of the Israeli army, with a barrier there, and woe to those who get too close. And what happens if those trends accelerate, the violence on the Palestinian-controlled street or the violence in the territory controlled by Israel? The hostages are free, say the headlines, and that is absolutely a good thing. The 20 living hostages and some corpses as well have been returned to Israel. But all the hostages? Not so fast, say the Israeli families of those bodies still in Gaza, whether they're being held there on purpose for further negotiation, or they're buried under rubble and not yet found, or may never be found. By the way, Israel is also holding Palestinian bodies, in case you didn't know, and some of those were exchanged too. And what happens if those bodies are never found, never returned? Is it the end or a new beginning? History says Israeli society can unite in victory, as it has in the past. And that would be great. Not so fast, say the opinion polls that suggest a plurality of Israelis believe that neither side won the war. They asked, who won the war? Israel, Hamas, or neither? And 48% said neither. They both lost a lot. Different losses, but significant losses. Israeli society will unify? Not so fast, say the army reservists who served deployment after deployment after deployment, while ultra-Orthodox Jews were violently protesting on the streets against having to share that draft burden. And the Israeli government continued to kick that can to deal with Israeli ultra-Orthodox draft exemptions. They kicked that can down the road again and again and again. Not so fast. A unified Israel? Say the left and the center that had been protesting this right-wing Netanyahu government for a whole year before October 7th. And they fear it will resume its agenda to transform the judicial system and to change Israeli society irrevocably. Sounds a bit familiar. And what happens if this government falls and there are elections that take place? Is that going to unify the country? Or what happens if the government stays its full term all the way through November 2026? That would be the first time an Israeli government had made it the full 4-year term in maybe 30 years. But they have another year to act decisively and to demonize the other side. Is that going to unify the country? An optimistic press release says the Palestinians have a bright future. That would be great, but not so fast. Say the shepherds and the olive grove farmers in the West Bank who have faced unchecked and sometimes IDF-assisted settler violence over the last 2 years and before. Not so fast. Say threats to withhold reconstruction aid if Hamas doesn't fulfill the ceasefire agreement, as Hamas is already making noises that it's not going to do. Hamas right now is filling a power vacuum, and it's also asserting control over territory that the peace agreement said they wouldn't control. The sociologist Max Weber said that government has a monopoly on violence. It's one of the ways of defining government. The only legitimate use of force is by the government through some system. But in anarchy, sometimes it works the opposite direction. The most violent people become the de facto government. And maybe that's happening there. A bright future for Palestinians? Not so fast, says history again, with Palestinian divisions used to undermine statehood prospects. There was a reason that before October 7th, Netanyahu did not try to fully destroy Hamas. Hamas has been in control of Gaza for 18 years. And Netanyahu's been in charge of Israel for much of that time period, and yet he enabled it to be there. He even facilitated funding to go to Gaza from Qatar and other places. Why didn't he want them destroyed or undermined? If you have two Palestinian territories with two opposing governing bodies, what are the odds they're going to come together to make one real Palestinian state? It's impossible. No matter how many countries recognize it, if you have two centers of power in two different territories, they're never going to get their act together. And that's been a strategy of the Israeli right for decades, to facilitate Palestinian division so that they can't come together to demand a unified Palestinian state. Right now you have Hamas, you have the Palestinian Authority, which Netanyahu did not want involved in the renewed governance of Gaza. And now we have the Gazan clans asserting themselves and this new technocrat committee that's supposed to run everything. More division means more delay. And what happens if things go south or continue as unsustainably, unstably as they are now? The fundraising appeal might say, with the end of the war, anti-Semitism will decline. I used to joke with my dad and say, Inshallah, which is Arabic for God willing, right? From your mouth to God's ears, even the God we don't necessarily think about. But not so fast. Decline in anti-Semitism? Not so fast. Say the Young Republicans text chat, the keyboard warriors unleashed, the left-wing Hamas apologists, the emboldened racists. Not so fast. Say the opinion surveys that show a sea change in perspectives on Israel and those who support it, including a large majority of Jews. You know, in many circles, the word Zionist, even lefty, liberal, two-state solution Zionist, is a dirty word. And it's hard to make the argument that Israel and Jews are totally separate when there's an Israeli flag on the bima of all those synagogues, and that same Jewish star is the same Jewish star, whether it's gold or blue and white. Where will the next shoe drop? Will Trump's steadfast support for Israel continue to turn progressives against Israel and possibly against Jews? Will midterm election Republican losses make them look for groups to blame or causes to blame? Maybe those liberal Jews that are so anti-Trump. That's worth a blame. You see, we're supposed to talk about what's next for Israel and Gaza. But first we have to be clear on what is right now. And those optimistic headlines sound wonderful, and it would be wonderful. But I have some doubts. I have some real concerns. Now, I do have to give President Donald Trump credit. Through cajoling and bluster and belligerence and flattery and throwing his weight around, he was able to get Hamas and Israel to agree to stop shooting. And he was able to get everyone from Egypt to Turkey to Qatar into a room to say, we endorse and support this. That is an achievement. Phase one of a ceasefire is cease firing, and that's happened. But now we face phase two. Phase two is where the sticky details are. Full Israeli withdrawal. To where? It's going to be more than that 50% they still control, but is it going to go to 0%? Israel's made a lot of noise over these 2 years about wanting more of a buffer zone around Gaza because the previous barrier they had obviously didn't work because there was an October 7th. So where does that line get drawn? And how fast does Israel withdraw? And what might undermine that withdrawal? And does withdrawal mean no bombardment? After all, Israel withdrew from most of Lebanon. But if Hezbollah shows up and tries to rebuild, they reserve the right, they say, to act. What does that mean? How does that work? And what if Hamas or Islamic Jihad or some random radical shoots a rocket, sends a fire balloon, tries to cross the line? A second challenge of phase two is full Hamas disarmament. Hamas tried to claim that they reserve the right to keep defensive weapons. They don't have an Iron Dome anti-rocket missile system. They don't have suits of armor or Kevlar material. They're talking small arms and machine guns. Well, those are used to kill people as they're doing in the streets right now. They want an abiding influence in Gaza and in the West Bank. And are the peacekeepers that have been promised from Indonesia and other countries, are they really going to go in there and take the guns away from Hamas at the risk of confrontation? Or are they simply going to wind up there getting in the way? You know, there was a United Nations force in southern Lebanon for years. It was called UNIFIL. And all it did was get in the way. It didn't stop Hezbollah from building. It didn't stop Hezbollah from creating weapon stores that Israel found in their invasion of Lebanon last year. It was not solving the problem. It was not keeping the peace. What will happen to these peacekeepers in this setting? Gaza is supposed to be rebuilt, right? It was going to be Gaza Lago, this new resort. It'd be perfect. But now, of course, you've got a lot of money, and money means leverage. Does the rebuilding become a kind of carrot and stick that's used by Israel or used by this Blair-Trump Board of Peace? Do they allow rebuilding everywhere or only in the places they approve of? Do they only rebuild in the areas controlled by Israel? Where do they draw that line of what to rebuild and who supervises the rebuilding? After all, Gaza's been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Where do you think all the concrete for those tunnels came from? It was from the rebuilding. What about the future prospects for Palestinian national aspirations? Remember, a couple of the last points of those 20 points talk about Palestinian national aspirations. Now, an interesting question I haven't seen debated very much is whether global recognition of a potential Palestinian state at the United Nations actually motivated Israel to accept a ceasefire that they had been dragging their feet on, because this was an unprecedented demonstration of Israel's isolation and the growing empathy for the Palestinian condition and Palestinian cause. You see, Israelis read recognizing a Palestinian state as being anti-Israel, because they assume the Palestinians will attack Israel at some point in the future. But I actually read it as empathy for the Palestinians. They've suffered enough. Maybe the way to stop them suffering is to get them a legal state that has the rights of a state, with borders and boundaries and restrictions on what other states do to it. So it was in response to what Israel was doing, not necessarily as a reward for terror, as Israelis read it. I don't know. It could be, though, that this declaration of recognition of a Palestinian state has hardened Israeli resolve to resist that no matter what. And some right-wing Israeli commentators see an ideal model for what would happen in Gaza is the West Bank, where Israel reserves the freedom of movement and can arrest whoever they want and can go wherever they want, wherever they feel they need to and are justified in going, no matter the rights of the people who are being affected. Do we really want to see more of that in Gaza, even without settlements there? And some still aspire to put settlements back in Gaza. Abba Eban, the longtime foreign minister, United Nations ambassador for Israel, famously said, "The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity." But I think Israel missed a chance this time, and they did it intentionally, by choice and by design. You know, a lot of Palestinian prisoners were released. Many of them were people who had been taken in the last 2 years over the course of activities in Gaza, and so they're short-term prisoners, but some of them were long-term prisoners. And some of them were truly terrible people who had murdered Israelis. But there was one person who's in prison for 5 life sentences whom Hamas asked for and Israel said no. His name is Marwan Barghouti. Now, you may not have ever heard his name before, or you may have heard it a long time ago. Marwan Barghouti was the head of the Fatah Tanzim, or sort of young activist wing, and during the Second Intifada in the early 2000s, he was accused by Israel of having masterminded some bombings that killed some Israelis. And so he was thrown into prison forever. Now, Marwan Barghouti is a charismatic person. He's fluent in Hebrew because he's been in Israeli prisons for long enough that he's picked up Hebrew. He has advanced degrees from Birzeit University. His wife is a very articulate ambassador for his cause. He has credibility among both the Fatah, PLO side of the Palestinian Authority side and the Hamas side from his time in prison, and credibility on the Palestinian street from that experience too. And he has explicitly come out in favor of a two-state solution. He also happens to be at least 20 years younger than Mahmoud Abbas. So if Marwan Barghouti were released, and the Palestinian Authority finally held a presidential election, which they haven't done in almost 20 years, and he won, there's no guarantees, but he could be their Mandela, their person coming out of prison to lead them to some kind of freedom, compromise, and peace, because he has that consensus and that bridge building and Hebrew fluency. He could go to the Knesset and make a speech like Anwar Sadat did in the 1970s. But now you might see why Netanyahu refused to release him. Because if you did release someone like that, and he did gain the legitimacy of a new election, and he did unite the factions, and now you've got one unified Palestinian national movement representing both territories and speaking the language of peace and compromise and coexistence, what does Israel do now? Let's keep it the way it is. Let's keep him in prison. Let's keep them divided. Let's keep the status quo. Status quo becomes almost a sacred mantra in this setting. I feel like Israel missed an opportunity. They could have said, ugh, we didn't want Barghouti out. We hated to do it, but here we had to. And what could have happened differently if he were out and saying the right things? What will happen next? There are many roles that I've had to fulfill in the recent years of sermonizing that my rabbinical school did not prepare me for. Geopolitical analysis, deciphering treaty and ceasefire legalese, military strategy. I'll give you my best guess of what I think will happen. I think that ultimately Israel will go for early elections before November of next year. There's going to be a big division over whether to hold an official inquiry into what happened and what went wrong on October 7th. There have been small-scale analyses of what happened on this kibbutz and what happened in this army base, but a system-wide analysis has not happened because the government has refused to do it. Israel actually has a very good national culture of that kind of self-analysis that's happened over many other disasters. We did that for 9/11 in this country. We had a whole commission that was bipartisan and did a deep investigation and wrote a whole report. I read it. It was fascinating. Israel does this historically. They haven't done it for 2 years for what happened on October 7th. But if the war is, if not over, drawing towards a close, there's no more excuse. It's time. And if the government continues to drag its feet and refuse to participate, in the end, some of their parties may say, I'm out. This is something we need to do. Or it could be the case that that ember of the draft law conflict might be the crack that brings down the government. Because you have to remember, Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionist party, as terrible as they are on so many issues, they are very patriotic in serving in the army. They serve in large numbers, and they had large proportion of the casualties of the fighting that took place. And they resent the ultra-Orthodox avoidance and resistance to serving in some capacity of national service or in the army. And so if that issue comes back to a head, with all those reservists who are back, who are now willing to make noise, that could also lead to the fall of the government. Now, as I said earlier, will this election bring the people together? I think it will be one of the most divisive elections Israel has ever seen, and it may result in a narrow victory for either side. You might say, how could Netanyahu possibly win after all this? Well, he can point to successes. He can point to what happened in Lebanon. That was a success. What happened with Iran? That was a victory. What happened with Syria? Assad is gone. We might even have a ceasefire there, officially, maybe even a peace treaty. We might expand the Abraham Accords and have more allies than enemies. You see, in America, the political slogan that has lasted for 30 years is, it's the economy, stupid. Like, if you don't talk about economic issues, you're not going to win. In Israel, the standard slogan is, it's the wars, stupid. If you can keep Israel safe, if you can be successful in battle and in conflict and in diplomacy to make those wars successful, you can be reelected. And that's been Netanyahu's argument for 30 years, is I'll keep you as safe as possible. Now, it could be that the result of that commission shows that he contributed to the problem, and then maybe he's done. But there are people who believe that he enacted a victory in the long-term strategy of the last 2 years. And those who see him as a victor will vote for him again to become prime minister and for his party to rule. Now, we know that Israel has committed a strategic failure. They've refused to articulate a vision of what happens next in Gaza. For 2 years, they've had 2 years to think about what happens now. Well, now is now. We're at now. And we have to find a way to figure out what comes next. But the avoidance of that for 2 years has come home to roost in the anarchy that obtains on the Gaza streets and the violence that's taking place there. Gazans do not like Hamas. They blame Hamas for the consequences of the attack on October 7th. They blame Hamas for hiding in tunnels and behind civilians and under civilian buildings. But they don't like Israel anymore. They like Israel even less. They hate Israel more because Israel was doing the actual bombing, the actual shooting to get at Hamas. And ongoing strife in Gaza, ongoing strife between Israel and Gaza, will prevent more normalization with other Arab states. You want to expand the Abraham Accords or the Avraham Accords? It's not going to happen while Gaza's falling apart. And it will also continue the problems we've seen within diaspora Jewish communities, arguing over what Israel has done or has not done, and beyond the Jewish communities of this experience of increased anti-Semitism. The Jewish star on the plane dropping the ordinance has an impact on the Jewish stars out here. Now, if there's a new government, if it's a narrow victory for the opposition to Netanyahu, does that open up new possibilities? Maybe. But support for any kind of Palestinian state in Israel right now is like, there's a technical term that pollsters use. It's called bupkis, which means almost nothing. It's very, very low. Because what did they see 2 years ago? It's still fresh in their memory. It's still part of the national trauma. And on some level, they haven't even been able to process it because they've been in the middle of the fighting and the losses and the military loss and then the missiles from Iran and then what happened in Lebanon and stuff from Yemen. And it's been one thing after another. When the noise quiets down, when the commission does its work, when people build memorials, when those kibbutzim begin to rebuild and reopen that were destroyed, then they'll be able to ask questions. And they might be able to say, with this new government, keeping the status quo, leaving Gaza for Gaza and trying to block it off with a bigger wall this time, maybe that's not going to work. Maybe we do need to try something else. It's a chance for, a variable experiment. Same situation, different political party, or does different political party open up the possibility for a new situation? Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm too pessimistic. I would be happy to be pleasantly surprised that all those uplifting, positive headlines turn out to be true, that Trump shows a long-term strategy of focus and discipline to enforce this peace board that he has empowered. It's good that there's another responsible adult named Tony Blair involved. Maybe that gives it more of a chance. Every day without major shooting and bombing is a good day. And maybe, just maybe, if we can build on that even one day at a time, that will add up to some kind of peace. We hope. Thank you for coming tonight to explore this question of war and peace in Gaza. Thank you to Janet for hosting our Oneg Shabbat, and thank you to Boris and Ellen for our music as well. Our closing song, which is on the last page of your service booklet, is Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, we bring you peace. And so I invite us to all sing together.
Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom Aleichem, Hevenu Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem.
Once again, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Please wish Shabbat Shalom to the people near you and to those online as well.